Some doors should never be opened, and some games should never be played. Tonight, you'll hear the chilling account of a man who dared to play the elevator game and live to tell the tale. Jordan had never been the type to chase after the supernatural. He grew up in a small, quiet town where life rarely strayed beyond routine: school, work, and the occasional night out with friends. He wasn't a thrill seeker, not the kind who searched abandoned houses or whispered ghost stories in cemeteries. But he had always carried with him a quiet curiosity about the unknown, not enough to go looking for it, but just enough to pause whenever he came across stories about things people weren't supposed to understand. That curiosity eventually led him to a game he should have never played. It started late one night as Jordan scrolled endlessly through online forums in his apartment. He had recently moved into the city for work, an ordinary mid-level job that paid the bills, but didn't leave him with much of a social life. The city was alive with movement and sound. But for Jordan, his nights were silent. He lived alone, tucked away on the 12th floor of a concrete high-rise that looked like 100 others in the district. That night, he stumbled upon a thread discussing urban legends from around the world. One in particular stood out: the elevator game. The post was written in a clinical way, as though the person was laying out instructions for something real, not just a myth. The elevator game, it said, originated from Japan and Korea, whispered about on obscure corners of the internet. According to the legend, if you followed a strict sequence of pressing buttons in a building with at least 10 floors, the elevator would take you somewhere else, another world layered just slightly off from our own. The rules were clear and uncompromising. The building had to be empty enough that no one else would interrupt the sequence. You had to ride alone. If someone entered, you had to start over. The sequence went like this: you press the button for the 4th floor, then the 2nd, then the 6th, then the 2nd again, then the 10th, then the 5th. On the 5th floor, something was supposed to happen. A woman might step inside. You were warned never to look at her, never to speak to her, no matter how tempting it was. She wasn't real, or at least not of this world. If you ignored her and continued pressing the 1st floor, the elevator would betray expectation. Instead of going down, it would rise. If it did, you would find yourself in the other world. The descriptions of this place varied from person to person, but the consensus was always unsettling. The building would be empty. The world outside the windows would be dark. Sometimes people reported a faint red glow on the horizon, as though from a fire far away. Some said it felt like the world was watching you. To return, you had to repeat the sequence in reverse. But there was one last rule. If you lost consciousness, if you grew disoriented, and couldn't tell whether you had returned to your own world or not, you could be trapped forever. Jordan read the rules 3 times. The forum comments were filled with dismissals, people calling it childish, others insisting they'd tried it and it worked. Jordan wasn't sure why, but the idea lodged itself in his head. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was the fact that he had recently moved into a building tall enough to qualify. Or maybe it was that strange mix of curiosity and unease that made him want to see if the game was more than just words on a screen. The building where Jordan lived was as ordinary as they came. A rectangular tower of gray concrete, stained from years of rain, its windows stacked in rigid rows. The lobby was bland, with flickering fluorescent lights and beige tiles that never looked clean, no matter how often the janitor mopped. The elevator was old, its doors opened with a tired groan, and its interior smelled faintly of metal and dust. A dull mirror lined one wall, warped in places from age. It was exactly the kind of place that seemed perfect for a ritual like this. Jordan told himself he didn't believe it. He told himself he was just testing an urban legend. But he couldn't deny that when he stepped into the elevator just past midnight, when the building was at its quietest, a weight settled in his stomach. The kind of heaviness you feel when you're doing something you know you shouldn't. He pressed the button for the 4th floor. The elevator lurched, climbing with a mechanical hum. The doors slid open to reveal the same empty hallway he had walked through 100 times before. He didn't step out. He pressed the button for the second floor. Down he went. The doors opened. Nothing but silence. The 6th floor was next. His heart began to beat faster as the doors closed again. By the time he pressed the 2nd floor once more, his palms were damp with sweat. He told himself it was silly. Just numbers. Just buttons. But something in the air felt different. On the 10th floor, the lights above the elevator flickered. He swallowed hard and pressed the 5th. As the elevator descended, the sound of the machinery seemed louder than before, groaning as though straining against an invisible weight. The doors slid open. Jordan didn't move. He kept his eyes fixed on the panel of buttons. He didn't want to look. The rules had been clear, but he felt it. The presence. A faint shift in the air, like another body had stepped inside. The silence pressed against his ears, and in the warped reflection of the mirror on the side wall, he caught the outline of a figure, not fully defined. Just the suggestion of a person standing there, a woman. Her breathing was so quiet it was almost imperceptible, but Jordan felt every second of it. The tiny shifts in sound, the way the atmosphere thickened with her being there. He wanted desperately to turn his head, to confirm what he thought he saw, but he didn't. He kept his eyes locked forward, just as the rules demanded. His thumb hovered, trembling, before pressing the button for the 1st floor. The elevator jolted. It did not descend. It began to rise. Jordan's stomach flipped. The numbers above the doors climbed steadily until they stopped at the top. The elevator shuddered and came to a halt. When the doors opened, Jordan felt his breath hitch. The building looked the same, but it wasn't. The hallway stretched out longer than he remembered, the fluorescent lights above flickering weakly, as though they hadn't been changed in years. The air was heavy, oppressive, filled with a faint acrid smell he couldn't place. The world outside the narrow window at the end of the hall was nothing but darkness. Not night, but something deeper. An endless void. And yet faintly, far in the distance, there was a glow. Red, dull, almost like embers on the horizon. Jordan stepped out. His footsteps echoed louder than they should have on the cracked tiles. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to go back, but his curiosity overpowered his fear, at least for a few seconds. The silence was suffocating. Even the hum of electricity was gone. No cars outside, no faint murmur of life from the floors above or below. It was a world abandoned, stripped of everything but himself. He hurried back into the elevator, keeping his gaze low and repeating the warnings to himself. Do not acknowledge her. Do not look directly. The moment the doors slid closed behind him, he realized something. She was no longer there. The oppressive weight of her presence had vanished, leaving the elevator unnaturally still. A shiver ran down his spine, a hollow unease that prickled at the edges of his mind. Something about her disappearance felt wrong, too complete, too silent, as if the space itself were holding its breath. Jordan's eyes drifted reluctantly to the mirror, and that's when he froze. It wasn't his reflection staring back at him. It looked like him, yes, but distorted. His features stretched and wrong. His eyes too dark. The reflection's mouth twitched upward into a grin, even though Jordan's lips hadn't moved. For a moment, the figure pressed a hand against the glass. Jordan's chest tightened with terror. He stumbled back, his legs trembling, and tore his gaze away. Jordan's hand shook as he reached for the elevator buttons again. He remembered the instructions. He had to repeat the sequence in reverse. He couldn't lose focus now. He pressed the sequence carefully, each floor a step closer to the real world. The distorted silence of the other realm pressed around him, heavy and unyielding. Floor by floor, he forced himself through the sequence. Sweat dripped down his temple. His knees threatened to give out. Every second stretched into eternity. When the doors finally slid open, Jordan held his breath. The world looked normal, the familiar beige tiles, the faint hum of electricity, the lobby just as he had always known it, as if the building had folded back into its proper shape and the otherworldly distortions had vanished. But he hesitated. The rules had warned him. Sometimes you couldn't tell. Sometimes the world would trick you. He stepped out cautiously, his eyes darting around for any sign of wrongness. The lights above flickered, but only once. Outside the front doors, he saw the city stretching into the night, headlights flashing, life moving on as it always did. Jordan exhaled a shaky breath. He was home. He never spoke of what happened to anyone. Who would believe him? He told himself he had imagined it, that his mind had played tricks on him in the silence of an empty building. And though he never dared to play the elevator game again, the memory stayed with him, proof that some urban legends were never meant to be tested. You've been listening to Room for Horror. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more true accounts of haunted places, urban legends, and terrifying encounters. Remember, curiosity can be deadly, and some games are never meant to be played.